Okay, so ang ating pong topic for tonight would be about the antiglobulin tests. Dalawa po ang types ng antiglobulin tests. This is also referred to as your Coombs test. Okay, so pareho lang po yun. Pag sinabing Coombs test or antiglobulin test, meron po tayong dalawang klase. Number one, we have the direct antiglobulin test, no? Fondly called DOT. And number two, we have the indirect antiglobulin test, which is also known as the IAT. Okay? Now, what do we wanna know about the following types of antiglobulin test? The major difference between the two is kung ano po yung nadedetect nilang klase ng sensitization. And when we say sensitization, that is, we refer to the binding. Okay, let me draw a red blood cell here. Alright, so this is a red blood cell. When we say sensitization, that refers to the binding of the antibody to our red blood cell. Okay? So, we want to know kung meron bang red blood cell at yung antigen sa red blood cells ay nabind ba ng antibody. Alright? So, yung binding na yun, maaaring mangyari sa loob mismo ng katawan ng pasyente or sa labas. Yun yung sinasagot na tanong ng antiglobulin test. Kapag nangyari yun sa loob ng katawan ng pasyente, ang tawag natin doon ay in vivo sensitization. Kapag naman nangyari sa labas ng katawan ng tao, ng pasyente, at ang sensitization ay mangyayari mismo sa test tube na ginagamit natin sa laboratory, then we refer to that as in vitro sensitization. And as you can see, and as you know, you already know, no, we'll just review this part. The direct antiglobulin test is used to detect in vivo sensitization, and the indirect antiglobulin test is used to detect the in vitro sensitization. So it's important for us to know, it's important for us to remind ourselves about the definition of the word sensitization. Okay? So one more time, just to remind us again about the definition of the word. Our sensitization refers to the binding of our antigens on our red cells and the antibodies present, if ever there are. Alright? So, alamin po natin yung procedure. Paano po ba ginagawa si DAT at paano ginagawa si IAT? Another question that we wanna know is, para saan ba sila? Ano ba yung application nila sa ating clinical setup, no? Tuwing kailan sila nire-request ng doktor, no? Para saan yung kanilang nade-detect na diseases or mga conditions. Okay, so let us go to another whiteboard. Okay, let's go to another whiteboard and let's look at the direct antiglobulin test. Okay, so the direct antiglobulin test, as we have said, will detect in vivo sensitization. And in vivo sensitization will happen in three important conditions. Now, ako po, I fondly remember the three conditions that will be detected by the TAT by using the mnemonic. Okay, walang kabastusan na kasama yan or kung ayaw mo ng medyo ang maging mnemonic mo dyan, pwede mo naman sabihin H-A-H. O kaya naman, pwede mong sabihin, HHA. Whatever method you want to read these three letters here so that you remember the three conditions that are detected by the direct antiglobulin test. Okay? The letter A stands for the autoimmune hemolytic anemia. Then the first H here is the hemolytic transfusion reaction. And the last H here refers to hemolytic disease of the newborn. And since kung ayaw mo yung mga binigay kong mnemonic like or okay, kung ayaw mo nun, pwede mo naman sabihin na triple H, no? Kung fan ka ng wrestling, you know triple H. Okay, so pwede mong gamitin yun as a way to remember the conditions that will be detected when using our direct antiglobulin tests. Okay? So, I hope that's clear. By the way, let us review kung ano po bang ibig sabihin nitong mga to. No? Ano ba yung autoimmune hemolytic anemia? Autoimmune hemolytic anemia is when we will see an autoantibody no, coating an RBC. So, yung autoantibody po yung ating yung antibody na may kasalanan sa autoimmune hemolytic anemia. Okay? Kapag naman po hemolytic transfusion reaction, no, ang antibody na implicated dito ay yung recipient antibody. Okay, yung recipient antibody. Recipient antibody coating the donor RBCs. And the last one, the HDN, no, yung antibody na implicated dito ay si maternal antibody na nagko-coat ng red blood cell ni fetus or ni baby. Okay? So, sa tatlong conditions na to, may tatlong klase ng antibodies na madedetect. Again, sa autoimmune hemolytic anemia, that will be detecting the autoantibody coating the RBCs of the particular patient. Sa hemolytic transfusion reaction, the recipient antibody coating the donor RBCs. And sa HDN, the maternal antibodies coating our fetal or the newborns red blood cells. Okay? So, alam na natin ha, yung tatlong conditions na nadedetect ng DAT. No? Kapag hindi kasama dyan sa kinabisado mong tatlong conditions na yan, edi malamang sa malamang ang sagot sa tanong ay ayat. Okay? For example, ang tanong sa'yo, anong klaseng antiglobulin test ang ginagamit para ma-detect mo yung klase ng antibody na na-detect mo using the antibody screening. So, in other words, if the question asks you about antibody identification, no, na nag-react sa antibody screening, de ayat ang sagot doon. Kasi wala naman tayong sinabi antibody screening dito. Okay? Tatlong conditions lang yung nabanggit natin, AIHA, HDR, and HDM. Okay? So, nasagot na natin yung question na para saan yung direct antiglobulin test, yung mga conditions, no? Next nating itanong sa ating mga sarili, ano po ba yung steps na dapat nating tandaan? Okay? Ano po yung mga steps na dapat nating tandaan? Alright? Okay, so the next question, no? The next question that we wanna know is how do we do the direct antiglobulin test and how do we interpret the result? Okay? So, I will draw here a patient. Okay, I have here a patient, no? Ito po yung aking pasyente. Ay, sorry, naging edematous yung kanyang other leg, no? Never mind, no? Basta ganyan siya. So, yan yung aking patient. Okay? So, kunwari, meron siyang isa sa conditions na nabanggit natin. So, that means, yung red blood cell niya sa loob ng katawan niya is already bound to our antibody. No? Be it an autoantibody or the maternal antibody. Okay? Alright. Okay. So, if we are collecting the blood from this patient, no, kolektahan po natin siya ng blood kasi kailangan natin ng specimen. Ang makukuha natin doon sa kanyang dugo is already a red blood cell with bound antibody. Right? Kasi sa loob pa lang ng katawan niya, meron ng sensitization na nangyari. Right? So, ang makukuha natin sa kanya is already a red blood cell bound to antibody. But we don't see it pa. Because usually, what causes the following conditions ay mga IgG antibodies na hindi nagkukos ng agglutination agad-agad. No? They are non-agglutinating IgG antibodies. And so, if ever they are present in our blood, no, hindi agad-agad sila nakikita. And that's why we will need to add another reagent for this purpose. Okay, so go back to our story. This is our patient. Kinuha na natin siya ng dugo. At dahil meron siyang kunwari AIHA o kaya HDR o HDN, ang nakuha nating dugo sa kanya ay naglalaman ng red blood cell na meron ng antibody. But we don't see that pa, no? Kasi non-agglutinating antibodies yung ating IgG antibodies, right? Okay, by the way, we use an EDTA whole blood for this purpose. Okay, ito pong specimen natin ay usually ginagamitan ng ating EDTA anticoagulant. No? Whole blood po iyan. Alright? So, what do we do next? No, kung makakolekta na po tayo, ang gagawin natin next is wash natin to. Okay, i-wash natin ang ating specimen. Okay? And the magic number to remember for washing is at least 3 times. Okay? At least 3 times. At least 3 times. And I repeated that 3 times for you to remember it more. No magic number to remember. When we are asked about the number of times we need to wash 3 times. Okay? And what is the purpose of washing? Para saan ba yung washing natin? The washing part removes the unbound antibodies. Okay, kasi hindi lahat ng antibodies ng ating patient ay magkakaroon ng kapartner na red cell. Okay, so meron ding mga unbound antibodies dyan. Okay, for example, na mag-drawing ako rito ng antibodies. Okay, so yung mga unbound antibodies na yan ay maaaring maka-interfere sa iyong procedure kung hindi mo sila tatanggalin. And that's why we will need to wash. Ayaw natin ng mga walang kapartner. In other words, ang gusto lang natin matira sa test tube ay yung mga in a relationship, no? Itong red cell na to at antibody na to, in a relationship yan. So, lagyan natin ng puso. In a relationship sila. Yung mga single, walang puwang sa mundo ng dot. Okay? Kaya, dapat matanggal sila. And para sila ay matanggal, iwawash natin yung ating specimen. So, pag nawash yan, wala yung mga single, no? Tanggalin ko yan na, binura ko na. Yung mga single antibodies dyan. Okay, kasi makiki-epal sila sa ating reaction eh. So, tinanggal muna natin sila. Alright? So, after washing, we then incubate at room temperature. Ay, by the way, before we do that, no, ito yung pinaka-super important para ma-detect natin. After washing, we will then add the anti-human globulin reagent. Okay? And I'm using a green ink here because you have to remember the color of this anti-sera. Okay? Di ba sa totoong buhay, kulay green yan? Si anti-human globulin. Si anti-human globulin ay isang anti-antibody. Na hindi siya katulad ng mga usual antibodies natin na ang tina-target ay antigen. Itong anti-human globulin ay isang anti-antibody. No, ang hinahunting niya ay mga antibodies din mismo, mga globulins din. Kaya nga siya tinawag na anti-human globulin. Okay? So, ang hahanapin niya, ang hahuntingin niya ay mga globulin molecules or mga antibodies. Okay? So, we will add AHG on this drawing. And, since meron po tayong red blood cell na meron nakabind na antibody, no, madedetect na yan ng ating anti-human globulin. Magbabind po si anti-human globulin sa ating antigen antibody complex. Okay? Alright, so that binding may be seen under the microscope as agglutination. Okay, pwede, kitang-kita mo na rin naman kung agglutinated, pero syempre, we have to really check if there is agglutination under the microscope. Okay, so let me just rewrite the positive result here. Okay, agglutination. Sometimes it will also be observed as hemolysis. Okay? Agglutination or hemolysis. That's because, no, pwede rin naman natin ma-detect, aside from the antibody, pwede rin natin ma-detect ang complement proteins na naka-attach sa red cells. Okay? So, agglutination or hemolysis will tell you that you have a positive dot reaction. Alright? So, one more time, pag nag-agglutination ka or nagkaroon ka ng hemolysis, that is positive dot. But what if wala? Okay? Halimbawa, naglagay ka na ng anti-human globulin, right? In-incubate mo na, tapos sinentrifuge mo pa. After centrifugation, chinek mo yung iyong specimen, nag-microscopic exam ka, wala kang agglutination. Okay? Wala kang agglutination. Wala ka ring hemolysis. So, if there is no agglutination, okay, if there is no agglutination or hemolysis, it may be a negative reaction. Now, I'm using the word maybe because hindi pa rin natin super sure at this point na negative siya talaga. Okay? So, that's why there is another step. Now, before we report this as really negative, super confirmed negative, we have to add the so-called Coombs check cells. Okay? So, let me write here, CCC, ito pong CCC na to, ay nangangahulugan ng Coombs check cells. Okay, Coombs check cells. Ito pong Coombs check cells na to ay mga red blood cells na po. No, red blood cells na yan sila. Na meron na talagang nakabind na antibodies or complement. No? Para mas simple yung ating drawing, puro antibodies na lang muna i-drawing ko. Okay, so ito po ay reagent po natin na red blood cells na may nakabind na talaga na antibodies. Alright? And the purpose of these Coombs check cells is to know kung nagamit ba talaga si AHG or na-neutralize siya. Okay? Kung hindi wala siya nagamit, let me correct what I have just said. No, ang gusto nating malaman Kung hindi pa talaga siya nagamit, kaya wala ka agglutination or hemolysis, or na-neutralize siya, kaya nagkaroon tayo ng negative agglutination or hemolysis. Okay? Let's put two scenarios here. Okay, scenario number 1. Kung halimbawa si patient mo ay negative talaga, ang meron sa kanya red cell lang, right? Walang antibody na nakabind kasi nga negative siya. Okay? So kung red cell lang ang meron si patient, kahit magdagdag ka dyan ng sandamakmak na anti-human globulin, hindi magbabind si anti-human globulin sa ating red blood cells, right? Kasi ang specificity ni anti-human globulin is against another antibody lang or a complement protein. But since red blood cells lang ang present sa patient na talagang negative, so scenario number 1 is negative, true negative to, na walang mangyayaring agglutination or hemolysis. That's why, again, no, para malaman natin, magdadagdag po tayo ng Coombs check cells. Okay? So, sa ating specimen na ginamit sa DAT na nag-negative sa agglutination or hemolysis, magdadagdag tayo ng red blood cells, okay, na meron nang nakabind na antibodies. Ito nga po ang tinatawag natin Coombs check cells. Okay? Pag dinagdag natin yan sa solution, ang mangyayari, itong mga AHG na to, okay, magsisipuntahan yan dito. Okay? Kasi free sila eh. Wala naman silang karelasyon eh. No? Free sila. Single sila. That's why you will have binding on this part. And if these cells are bound, this will result to agglutination or hemolysis. And that tells you na totoong negative reaction ang meron ka. Bakit po totoo na negative reaction? Kasi yung AHG na nilagay mo ay nagamit mo pa no, pang-detect ng mga Coombs check cells na dinagdag mo. Okay, so ito po, pag nag-bind sila, magkakos na yan ng agglutination or hemolysis, and that is what we expect to happen kung totoong negative si patient. But what if meron siya talaga? Yun nga lang, okay, yun nga lang, nagkaroon ng problem sa procedure. Okay, so meron siya talaga. Let's look at scenario number 2. Scenario number 2 is, napalitan yung ink, wait lang, palitan natin ulit. Scenario number 2 is a patient na meron talagang antibodies na nakabind sa red cells nila. Okay, so positive siya talaga. Ba't napapalitan? Okay, positive siya talaga. Alright? Pero, nung ginagawa ni MEDTECH, okay, so drawing tayo ng iba dyang unbound antibodies, nung ginawa ni MEDTECH yung direct antiglobulin test, nakalimutan niya mag-wash. Okay, di ba sabi natin, ang purpose ng washing is to remove unbound. And so, if you omit that procedure, yung mga unbound or yung mga single antibodies dun sa yung specimen ay hindi matatanggal. Kaya, pagdagdag mo ng anti-human globulin, instead na dito kakabit si anti-human globulin, okay, dito siya kumabit, okay, dun sa mga single na antibodies. And since wala naman nakakabit na antigen dyan sa mga single antibodies na yan, hindi mo rin yan makikita as agglutination. Okay? So, yung supposedly na anti-human globulin antibodies na dito magkakabit sa mga antibodies na naka-attach na red cells, nagamit sa mga unbound globulins. That's why this is termed as neutralized. No? Yung ating pong AHG reagent ay na-neutralized. Nagamit natin. Alright? And so, dahil na-neutralized siya, hindi natin makikita ang agglutination or hemolysis. That's why we think na negative result ang ating DAT. Okay? Kaya pag chinek natin to by adding Coombs check cells, no? Maglagay tayo ng Coombs check cells para malaman natin kung totoong negative ba yan talaga. Again, Coombs check cells are red cells with antibodies bound to them already. Okay? Since naglagay ka dyan ng red cells na meron ng antibody, dapat magbabind dyan ang AHG. Okay? Pero since itong mga AHG na to ay occupied na, nagamit na siya, nakabind na siya sa iba, wala na magbabind dyan sa mga Coombs check cells mong yan. So, they will remain not agglutinated. Okay? No agglutination. And if after addition of Coombs check cells, wala ka agglutination, that means you have an error in your procedure. And what error are we referring to? Okay, the error of omitting the wash step, no? Forgetting to wash or inadequate washing. Yun yung most common error po natin. Okay? Most common error in our direct antiglobulin test and as well as in the indirect antiglobulin test is forgetting to wash, no, or inadequate washing. Okay, pag hindi kasi nawala yung unbound globulins, nang-neutralize natin yung anti-human globulin, which should have bound our red cells with antibodies attached to them. Pero dahil na-omit natin si wash step, na-neutralize, and so again, if we check it using our Coombs check cells, we will see no agglutination. So this will lead to a false negative reaction. Okay? Ang usual scenario dito in the exams is ganito, no? Sasabihin sa'yo, uy, ikaw daw yung medtech na nirequestan daw ng maggawa ng DAT. Okay? Tapos, nag-collect ka ng specimen. Ay, sorry, hindi pala yan. Okay? Ano ba yun? Ano bang gusto kong sabihin? Alright, ang usual scenario dito is itatanong sa'yo, no, upon doing, for example, cross-matching o kaya direct antiglobulin testing or indirect antiglobulin testing, no, sa umpisa, negative ka. Ay, nabanggit ko yung cross-matching kasi po sa cross-matching, no, third part ng cross-matching si ayat. Okay, so kunwari negative ang resulta mo, so nirelease mo siya. Okay, so nirelease mo siya. Pagka-release mo, nung nag-transfuse daw si patient, kasi okay yung ano mo okay yung checking mo negative ka sa lahat Nung nag-transfusion si patient, nagkaroon daw ng reaction. Okay? Nagkaroon daw ng transfusion reaction. Okay? Kaya sasabihin sa inyo, oy, laboratory, blood banking, do workup, no? Bakit tayo nagkaroon ng transfusion reaction? And so you will again retest your specimens. Okay? Redo your tests. Tapos, sasabihin sa'yo sa question, upon repeating the tests again, ngayon, using the same specimen nag-positive ka na. So, what happened in that scenario? Okay? So, ang sagot doon is, again, you forgot the washing step. Okay? Dahil, ang pagkakalimot ng washing step, ang pagkakatanggal ng washing step, ay magli-lead sa false negative reaction. Kaya ka pala negative nung una, nakalimutan mong mag-wash. Kaya pala nagkaroon ng transfusion reaction, positive pala talaga si patient. Okay? Kaya, nag-positive ka upon investigating, no? Using the same specimens. Alright? So, let's go back to our previous picture. So, one more time, this is your direct antiglobulin test. Okay? So, one more time, a summary na lang, no? Ang ating pong direct antiglobulin, ay nagde-detect ng in vivo sensitization at itong in vivo sensitization na to ay nangyayari sa tatlong conditions, no? Autoimmune hemolytic anemia, hemolytic transfusion reaction, or hemolytic disease of the newborn, kung saan ang mga antibodies na nabanggit natin ay maaaring IgG in nature at hindi agad-agad makita. Okay? They do not cause direct agglutination. So when we collect whole blood from the patient using anticoagulant EDTA, we will not see agglutination right away. Okay? And before we add the super reagent involved in this, which is AHG, we wash our specimen first to remove the antibodies which are not bound. Okay? It removes unbound antibodies. And after that, we will add our AHG reagent so that this AHG reagent will attach to antibodies which are attached to the antigens on our red blood cells, causing agglutination or hemolysis. The positive result for that or direct antiglobulin test is agglutination or hemolysis. If ever after addition of AHG, wala ka ma-appreciate na agglutination or hemolysis, it may be a negative reaction, but you have to check first using the Coombs check cells before you report it as negative or walang reaction. Okay? So how do we do that? Coombs check cells are reagent red cells which are already bound, alright, to antibodies or complement. Okay? And if ever the patient is really negative, after addition of Coombs check cells, dapat po makakita ka ng agglutination reaction. Okay? Kung ang pasyente mo ay nagkaroon ng false negative reaction after addition of Coombs check cells, you will see no agglutination. And that is the most frequently encountered error in using antiglobulin tests. Alright? Inadequate washing or forgetting to wash your specimen. Okay, so let's proceed to the next type of antiglobulin test. The next type of antiglobulin test is the indirect antiglobulin test, and as we have established a while ago, this is used to detect in vitro sensitization. In vitro sensitization compared to our in vivo sensitization by that. Okay? So, dito po tayo ngayon sa indirect antiglobulin test. Kung ang sabi natin kanina ay sa that or triple H ang gusto nating matandaan, no? Sabi ko nga, mas madaling sagutin kung sasabihin mo sa sarili mo, basta wala sa okay, ayat ang sagot. Okay? Pero we wanna specify kung ano yung mga wala sa at ayat ang isasagot mo. No? Sulat po natin dito sa gilid. Ito po ay ginagamit natin if we wanna identify antibodies. No? As part of compatibility testing, yun po yung ginagawa natin bago natin release yung ating blood, diba? Tinitignan natin kung compatible si donor at si recipient, and we do several tests there. Okay? So, isa na doon si antibody identification. Okay? Antibody identification is also done, no, kapag nag-positive ka sa antibody panel. Alright? What else? No, gusto rin natin na gamitin to sa antibody detection. Okay, dapat pala yun ang inuna natin kasi pag naka-detect ka, saka mo lang i-identify. Okay, so antibody detection, antibody identification, no? Sabi ng libro nating si Harmony, pwede mo rin yan gamitin sa tinatawag na antibody titration. Okay? And if you wanna know the RBC phenotype. Okay? Ito po yung clinical application ng ating indirect antiglobulin tests. Okay? And I want to use antibody detection as my example. Okay? Gusto ko malaman kung meron bang antibody si patient na magre-react sa aking cell. Okay? So, what we wanna do here is this patient, no, magkukolekta po tayo ng ating specimen kay ating patient. Alright? So, this is our patient for IAT. And the question I have in mind right now is that if this patient has the antibody, okay, so I'm going to choose an antibody, no, ito pong antibody na to ay si anti-kel. Okay, yung drawing kong yan, anti-kel yan. Okay, anti-kel ang gagamitin ko kasi, di ba, among the non-ABO blood groups, no, si anti-kel ang isa sa mga commonly encountered antibodies. Okay, sa blood bank. So, the question here is, itong patient ba na to natin, may anti-kel antibodies? Okay? Yun yung gusto nating malaman. And so, kapag kinolektahan natin siya ng dugo, ang makukuha natin sa kanya ay yung antibody mismo. Right? Yung antibody mismo. Wala pang red cell na nakakabit sa kanya kasi ang sensitization na tinutukoy natin dito ay mangyayari sa labas. Okay? So, yung antibody na yon na nasa kanya mismo, no, nabuo niya talaga mismo sa katawan niya, pag kinolekta natin yan sa ating specimen, makukuha natin siya sa loob ng test tube at wala tayong makikitang agglutination kasi wala naman siyang kapartner na antigen or red blood cells. Right? So, what do we do next? We add red blood cells. Okay? These are known cells. Red blood cells with known antigens. So, kung anti-kel yung gusto nating ma-detect, maglalagay tayo dyan ng reagent red cells na may kel antigen. Okay? So, idagdag natin to sa drawing. Since specific sila sa isa't isa, magbabind ang red blood cell at ang antibodies. Okay? Magbabind ang red blood cell at antibody. At yung binding na yon ay mangyayari sa loob ng test tube. And that's the word in vitro. Okay? Sa loob mismo ng test tube nagkaroon ng sensitization si antibody tsaka si antigen. Again, that emphasizes IAT is for in vitro sensitization. Okay? Magkukos ba yan na agglutination ulit? Hindi pa po. Kasi nga, dahil IgG antibodies usually ang ating mga significant antibodies detected, they will not be causing direct agglutination. Alright? So, after incubating, no, incubate po muna natin ito at 37 degrees Celsius. Okay? Oh, by the way, lagi natin nakalimutan nung magkakaroon tayo ng false negative reaction dito, no? Iwawash din natin siya. Okay? Wash din po natin ng 3 times. Alright? Sulat muna natin yung pinaka-importanting part na yan. Iwawash muna po natin siya ng 3 times. So, one more time, the magic word for this is wash 3 times. Okay? After washing for 3 times, we add the anti-human globulin. Okay? The anti-human globulin. By the way, I was saying, no, sulat din natin kasi importante rin to. No? After mo maglagay ng red cells dito, incubate mo siya at 37 degrees Celsius. Dito ko na lang susulat incubation is done at 37 degrees Celsius. Okay, 37 degrees Celsius. Then after incubating, we wash our specimen 3 times. Again, that is to remove unbound globulins before we add the AHG reagent. Now, this is our HG. Dadagdag na natin siya sa drawing. So, since meron tayong in a relationship na antibody-antigen na magbabind dyan si ating antibody, okay, magbabind dyan si ating antibody, causing again agglutination or hemolysis. So, ganun din yung ating positive test sa ating indirect antiglobulin test, agglutination or hemolysis. Okay? Ang incubation is about 30 minutes, 15 to 30 minutes. Okay? Or depende po sa ating protocol ng ating blood banking. Alright? Alright. So, what else? After po natin i-check ang ating specimen for agglutination or hemolysis, okay, kung mag-positive ka, edi meron ka reaction. Kung mag-negative ka, babalik ka na naman dun sa ating Coombs check cells. Okay? Aalamin naman natin kung ang ating reaction ay negative talaga or nagkaroon lang tayo ng false negative reaction because again, we forgot to wash or there is an inadequate washing. Baka naman isang beses lang tayo nag-wash at hindi lahat ng unbound globulins ay natanggal. Okay? So, yun lang, no? Pag sa indirect antiglobulin po, ang pinag-uusapan natin, na ang pinagkaiba lang nito, ang ating specimen ay serum. Okay? Serum. Kasi ang dinedetect natin dito ay antibody ni patient. Alright? So, serum ang ating specimen. Pag ayat, whole blood ang specimen mo kapag DAT. Okay? So, isummarize na natin si ayat. Si ayat po ay ginagamit natin for in vitro sensitization. Alright? In vitro sensitization. And, that in vitro sensitization refers to binding of antibody and red blood cells inside the test tube. Okay, so we usually get specimen from the patient using his or her serum para makita natin kung may antibody ba na present. And then we add known red blood cells, that's our reagent red cells. If they are specific to each other, they will bind inside the tube. Okay, and that binding will not result to agglutination first. Okay, and so we need to add HG. But before we add HG, we will wash our specimen first. And again, the magic number is 3 times. Okay? 3 times washing will remove unbound globulins para hindi natin ma-neutralize yung ating anti-human globulin reagent. And if our specimen is positive, we will appreciate presence of agglutination or hemolysis. If negative, there will be no agglutination or hemolysis. But then again, remind yourselves na before we really confirm a negative reaction, we will need to add the Coombs check cells para malaman natin kung negative ba talaga o false negative ang ating reaction. Alright? So, I think that's it for our discussion for tonight. No? Medyo brief lang, mga talagang importanteng part lang ng ating antiglobulin tests ang diniscuss natin. Okay? Be prepared for questions like situational here, no? Kapag kasi naintindihan mo yung procedure, no, maintindihan mo rin kung paano mo sasagutin kahit situational ang sasabihin sa'yo. Okay? So, yeah, that's gonna be the coverage of our antiglobulin lecture. No, if you need more details, then I invite you to read Harmony. That's our reference book for our blood banking. All right? So, I wanna thank everyone who joined us tonight for this session. No, ito po ang ating discussion for antiglobulin tests. If you have questions, you may ask me. If not, it's time for us to say goodbye. No, medyo isang oras din yung tinagal ng ating discussion. So I wanna thank everyone who joined us using the Zoom application and also using our Facebook live stream. Okay, I will be uploading this on our Facebook and on YouTube para may mabalik-balikan ka, para kung may makalimutan ka man, mabalikan mo. Thank you so much, everyone.